Welcome back to another episode of the Casey Campbell podcast. Casey Campbell with you, of course. Pleased to be joined by the one, the only Barack Beard from lastcar.info and your neighbor, your friendly neighborhood NASCAR historian on YouTube. How's it going?
Going great. Thank you for having me on.
And of course, this is my present to all of you. It is Christmas Day, so
Merry
hopefully you're
Christmas to your
enjoying.
viewers out there.
Yeah, of course.
Happy
Hope you're
holidays,
enjoying
wherever
your
they're.
day. Your day today. So Brock, this is it's been an interesting off season for you. Just kind of talk about what you've been up to since Phoenix.
Well, good question. It's right now just been catching up on videos there for the channel. Getting we had a video that worked with Mike Harmon about his hauler theft in 2020. And just other videos I just kind of had in waiting in the wings through the summer, but catching up on those, which has been a relief. We were talking a little bit before the show here, and it'll be already up by the time this is online. But the next episode of 500 Days on the spring race at Darlington in 2001 was the next big project they're looking to get done, and then that'll be up online. One reason that some of these videos were delayed was I published my next book on Derek Cope. This is it right here. Cover design by Ryan Daly, the artwork by Rob Taylor, based on an original Russ Hamilton senior picture provided by Charlie Birch. Several interviews in this, original pictures from the Cope family archives. But the sequel to my, they're really more standalone books, really. But the next book that I've written after the J.D. McDuffie book in 2018. So I was very happy to get this out. The Copes have actually, as this being aired on Christmas, the Copes told me that they were picking up some copies of it to have as stocking stuffers for a lot of their friends. And that's something that's very interesting in the story is just, how many, everybody that was either a business partner, a sponsor, team member, they're still very good friends with them and everything. So that's something that was really cool to be able to add a little piece of it to with that. So it's been a busy time. Just my focus next year is kind of going to be much more towards videos on the channel. Now that the book is out, we're going to try to do some book signings along the way. We kind of kept 2024 pretty open ended. I'd like to do something bigger in 2025, kind of save up the vacation hours at work. Actually, as I'm filming this, I just finished up working from home today, pushing some papers here. So definitely wanted to make sure, to kind of strike that good balance there between the NASCAR stuff and the day job. So that's about it. Other than that, just getting ready for the holidays.
Absolutely. Let's talk about, okay, first off, before we get into really get into the book, where can the book be where if people want to get it, where can they find it?
Yes, good point. So the book can be picked up on Amazon. It's on there exclusively. It's in paperback as well as audiobook and digital ebook. So if you prefer to read it on your phone or on a Kindle, it's available in that format. The audiobook is narrated by myself. I recorded it about a year ago. Had a couple of updates to the book through the year, so got that polished there. So you can check that out. Yeah, we're working on getting again doing some book signings and trying to get it more available in other bookstores. In fact, actually, at the time of this recording here, I'll have my first book signing in Sutter Creek, California. That is going to be on a Thursday evening here. But again, this will be airing well after that signing. But we're going to be doing some other signings in the meantime here that we'll be having some more news about.
And if also let's get the business taken care of.
Sure.
First off, if someone needs if book signings, where can they find them?
Best way to find details on that, my social media at Last Car on Brock on Twitter or X. That's the best way to find out information on that. My details, if you want your book signed as well, my P.O. box is also available on the website, lastcar.info, which itself is getting upgraded over this off season and working with a web designer there, but the address is still available on that page.
Absolutely. Um, why when you the Cope book, what made you want to do? I know you wrote the book about JD McDuffie a few years ago, but what made you decide to write a book about Derek Cope?
That's a good question. Cope is I think when I was writing, JD and thinking about what direction I wanted to do with writing other books, I wanted to have there be a common thread, but I didn't want that common thread to be tragic stories in sports history. I mean, I've certainly covered that on the channel, like whether 500 days or 3 before February, but I wanted to make sure there was still some kind of connecting thread with JD and then whatever the next subject was going to be. And with Derek, I think in really he was very much an underdog through his career, from exactly the opposite end of the country, raised more on the West Coast. And really, the circumstances behind him winning the Daytona 500 in 1990, it could well have been a circumstance that JD would have found himself in earlier in his career. Maybe he had a really good run. And, instead of, Dale Earnhardt blowing the tire and Derek Cope winning the race, JD McDuffie may have had one where he led a lot of laps and then had a bad pit stop, as he had at Nashville in 78, for example, but, or 79, I believe. So, again, it's just a matter of, these small moments that could elevate a driver that's a long time underdog into somebody that won a race. So kind of shifting, at the same time, from a driver that was famous for not winning a race to a driver that's almost singularly known for winning one particular race. And I think in both respects, those kind of overshadow a lot more details about what their racing career was, what their career felt like to them, who their fans were, and really trying to paint a broader picture of it. And I was very encouraged, especially when Mike Joy provided, he was the first person, one of the first people to provide a review endorsing the book here before it came out, since he was at basically right in the middle of a lot of those events. He was interviewing Derek in Victory Lane in the 500, and had known of him coming through the ranks. And, there was even stuff in there that he felt was eye-opening. And of course, the advantage of that is, of course, Derek is still very much with us, and, provided some very candid interviews dating back to 2018 that I think really add to the heart to the book. And also to kind of address your question as well. For me personally, Derek was probably the first driver I pulled for, or at least the first paint scheme I liked seeing as a kid. That Purolator car, the rocket red to white with the checkered pattern and the blue numbers. One of the first diecasts I remembered having. I remembered he signed my hat at Sears Point back in 1992. There's a picture of him reaching up and handing my Mickey Mouse hat back over the fence there. So that was just it definitely left an impression on me. And his career is one that I've followed, not the only one. Jerry Nadeau and Ricky Rudd were others that I followed later on. But Derek was probably the first one where he really identified the person with the team, and you start to kind of develop that. And when the JD book was done, this felt like a good follow-up. Somebody else, because the JD story is something I'd followed for years. And then this one, I wanted to kind of do something, again, a little more personal in this, where it was, more from kind of a fan perspective. And I think that was really kind of the goal here. And the thing that I found that was really enjoyable is that pretty much everybody that, again, as I said, everybody that Derek and his wife Alicia have interacted with have themselves remained lifelong fans. So it was really kind of just geeking out about NASCAR history in pretty much all these conversations. And I think that that'll be something that the reader will find entertaining as well.
How did they and I know they've looked at the book. What did they what were their first impressions when they first saw it?
They were very pleased with it. I was, and I was nervous about it. We had gone back and forth on some different manuscripts. In fact, actually, this is mentioned in the book. When Starcom Racing ran their last race at Phoenix in 2021, I was working there that weekend. And after the Quinn Houff had wrecked out about halfway through the race, we were actually walking through the parking lot on the Phoenix property there, and getting the latest copy of the manuscript from Derek's rental car there that weekend. He had some other notes that he was making there. So this was very much a project where the ending kind of was rewritten a few times. And of course, at that point, I didn't have anything chronicling what was happening that weekend. Of course, that's in the book now. So it's almost, I think the development of this book kind of became something that it ultimately became kind of a chronicle of Starcom Racing, certainly the book's latter chapters here. And I think for that, it became a very personal experience for them as well. I mean, the first interview I did with them was in Phoenix in 2018, where the team was just completing their first full-time season. And so, that's not the main focus of the book. Of course, it's just a broader look at his entire career. But I think for that, I think that they were very excited and very supportive of it, and I think that was even more so. They definitely wanted their story to come out, especially with their new phase of their careers. They're now working with Trans Am team, Nitro Motorsports.
Right. Okay, so with 500, the next episode of kind of getting into the back into the 500 days. This episode, okay, so it's been a while since we've had a new one of these.
Yes.
Whereas for people that don't know, just kind of catch everybody up on where we left off.
Sure. And this is I'm hoping the future episodes aren't going to be quite this long of a wait. I really appreciate everyone's patience on this. But yeah, where we left off in May, and certainly in anticipation of Kevin Harvick running the 29 car one more time in the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro. I just happened to have completed the first 4 episodes of 500 Days back in January, covering the events of the 2001 Daytona 500, the following week at Rockingham. And of course, that left open the next 2 races on the schedule were Vegas and, of course, Harvick's dramatic win in Atlanta in the first race for that white and red number 29 car in the Atlanta race there. So that was really kind of probably one of the biggest challenges this year, was to really kind of make sure to get those 2 episodes out that weekend. So that's where we left off in back in May, was Kevin Harvick's dramatic victory in Atlanta, winning by 0.06 of a second over Jeff Gordon in that incredible photo finish. Several storylines as well that day, including perhaps the best run that Dave Blaney ever had. Of course, his son Ryan Blaney winning the Cup championship just this past season. But other drivers that were contenders there, Jerry Nadeau being a factor in it. And again, these are the stories that carry over into the next episode, which is going to be on the spring race at Darlington, and really looking to kind of keep that going and kind of learn more. It's amazing reliving these races here. I remember experiencing more as a fan, just watching guys I pulled for, like Derek Cope or Ricky Rudd or Jerry Nadeau. But there's so much more that happens around it when you watch it now in hindsight, even when you know the outcome of the races. It really gives you like a broader view of it. And I hope to make that still the format basically for how that series goes forward.
Yeah. And I know we kind of talked about this last time you were on here, but where do you see, this series, I know the J Ski archives go back to, I have no idea how long they go back. I think 2001. But going through the early 2000s was a very interesting time in NASCAR. Do you see going into chronicling 2002, 2003, even in 2004 and in that time?
It depends. I think the main push right now is going to be certainly on just 2001 at the moment. I think that season itself, again, Speed Channel did a documentary on this as well, and I think they did a decent job on it, but even then there were so many storylines in that I think it didn't really give it full justice. Yeah. Obviously, the key moments, of course, 2001 500 and Junior's win at Daytona and the response to the 9/11 attacks and the race at Dover. It hits on the big points, but there was so much going on in between. Even in the championship battle was ridiculous that year, with the talent and teams on the rise that were really challenging the old guard, and even drivers like Jeff Gordon kind of becoming, almost not really the old guard themselves, but kind of really even more establishing their legacy. But yeah, in terms of doing multiple seasons after, I leave open the possibility. I feel like Field Fillers kind of does the 2004 season pretty well, because especially with the kind of race by race analysis, even though we're just looking at the back of the field in most cases in that one. But yeah, it's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, for sure. Really kind of looking at other things that are there other things that you're interested in chronicling, for the channel, Brock?
It's a good question. Actually, one video that I did produce about the same time as the Mike Harmon video, and this was another bit of research that actually kind of just a rabbit hole I kind of fell down, was the story of Quebec, New York, 2001, which was a convention that I believe it was the Bureau of Seasons in Quebec was planning on setting up directly across the street from the World Trade Center, and it was going to start on September 12th, 2001. And when I found thankfully there were a couple of people that posted some very rare video from Canadian television about this event, but there were very few stories, and even contacting a lot of the reporters involved didn't provide a lot of information to it. It's kind of been forgotten. But then I found out more and more about this, about a regatta that had been set up, a flotilla of boats leaving Quebec that was going to arrive dramatically, in mid-September and kick off this exposition. It was really I thought a very unusual story, and again, I think that for people my age or even younger that weren't either that were too young to understand what was happening, that day, or just didn't remember it at all. I think there's a lot of curiosity about anything surrounding the September 11th attacks, much like my parents' generation is about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So in this one here, I didn't anticipate it. I was just kind of doing it for my own curiosity. But then when I finally did start finding some articles and kind of stitching them together and really trying to learn what on earth was going on with this, it's like, wow. I mean, there were, just coincidences, like, a play that was supposed to actually be about terrorism that was going to be airing in New York around the same time. I mean, clearly there was no way that was going to be presented after what happened. It was just a really fascinating story. So I think, and that was interesting to me because, of course, it's a story that has absolutely nothing to do with NASCAR, but very much the same, historical curiosity. So I am thinking about maybe producing some content that's not necessarily on the sport, but also requires similar level of research there. So we'll see. I mean, that was definitely an experience that pretty much from mid-September to, I guess it was mid-November when I posted it. That pretty much took all my attention. Like, I mean, I kind of had it in the background even during Phoenix. I was just kind of, I wanted to learn more about it, but I also kind of wanted to show everybody where this was, because there was Google searching it even didn't produce a lot of results. So it's like, okay, it's like, wow, you sometimes find something, and sometimes that happens in the NASCAR content too. So not to sell that short.
Yeah. Also, let's get, back to the present day a little bit. Your
Sure.
thoughts on the 2023 NASCAR season as a whole?
It's, I mean, it was solid, I would say. I think that, I was very intrigued by Slapshoe's video recently about the legitimacy of the championship, and I think the one big thing that he kind of hammered home, and that, at least to me, was the fact that the current point system is the championship is so central to everything. Like, it's everything else is completely secondary, whether or not it's who's winning a race, or who's having a string of good runs or anything like that. And it's made it so that every single year's storyline is going to be exactly the same. It's going to be four people going for the championship. And as much as I've enjoyed, and it's been an honor to be a part of a few of these championship battles in the recent years, and see, all the excitement building up around it. It just seemed like, and this kind of goes back to the 500 days thing too, that each race would have that same atmosphere, because winning a Cup Series race is such a big event for these drivers. Ross Chastain, even when at Phoenix, for winning the race that Blaney clinched a championship in, when people were asking, it seemed like people were splitting hairs about, like, well, you didn't win the championship. Do you even really care about winning this? It's like, no, it's winning a cup race. And I mean, that's massively important. You never know when that's going to happen again, whether it's during a championship weekend or not. And that was always the way I felt about it growing up. I always felt like, championships are nice. Like, okay, and it's a great connecting storyline to link one race to the next and see, who's improving and who's struggling. But it's just everything is the championship. And I mean, following Jerry Nadeau growing up, I was always like, I was waiting for him. I never thought about him winning a championship. I was just like, I want him to just win a race. And he did just that one time. And, and again, I'm sure he'll tell you that's a big moment. He knows the significance of that. He knows all the other drivers that have been in the sport, like JD, that never had a shot at it or never quite got there. So that's another part of it. but I mean, I think that's kind of what's colored my kind of memory of this season. I think it's been more just kind of I'm kind of over the points format where we have it right now, and that's unfortunately kind of colored my memory of the season a bit. I think that we had some good races and some good battles and some very interesting storylines. Things happening, I mean, drivers like Carson Hocevar getting into the Cup Series. I know we talk about his challenge for the Truck Series and the mess that happened at Phoenix in the championship battle. But in between that, I mean, little moments like when he was driving for Legacy Motor Club at Bristol and he was almost in the top 10, if not a top 5 run. And, everybody's talking about the playoffs and all that. And yeah, I get it. But he was having a great run that like he could have won that race. And, and if he did, who knows what's going to happen. Things like that. I think those are, I worry that those memories just get forgotten in general because they're just not the story. If everything's a championship, if you're not one of those 16 guys, or if you're not currently still eligible, it just kind of gets left behind, and that's what I miss. I miss when those things were big moments. Like I remember when Rich Bickle got fourth at Martinsville in 1998, and he didn't win the race, and he never finished better than that in a Cup race, but it was a big moment, and he may not have had anything to do with the championship, but that was huge, and I feel like there's not enough attention in the sport to balance both this playoff system here with elimination rounds and smaller stories that happen in between. At least that's the way I feel.
Yeah. Your thoughts on the new TV deal?
I'm intrigued by it. I think we were all waiting for streaming to take a big part, a bigger role in the way TV is. I mean, for us personally, I mean, we've kind of transitioned to Roku in the last couple of years just because we're just kind of tired of dealing with cable. So I don't even remember really what the cable experience is like for people these days or anything like that. I know the line seems like it seems like it's even the line between computers and TV itself is kind of blurred, where even TVs look like computer monitors and vice versa and so forth. It didn't really surprise me too much that Amazon was jumping in with that portion of the new contract. I was kind of surprised that other networks weren't. I mean, there was well, I guess we do kind of have some other networks that are being involved in it at the same time there too. But I thought the Fox NBC supremacy of that was going to kind of be broken up a little bit more than it was. It kind of was there with Turner kind of getting back in there a bit. It's interesting. It's interesting. I think the problem is going to be, and again, I may not be able to speak to this, is just the accessibility of the sport for people. Like how accessible are all those outlets going to be? I mean, what's the number of fans they're going to be able to watch, watch these between Fox and NBC and still have the Amazon streaming service? I remember back, as a kid, you would have races on like TBS and you'd have it on CBS, and I guess that would probably be the modern equivalent of it, or I guess today's equivalent is having it be on like cable TV, basic channels versus streaming only services. It'd be kind of like watching it on broadcast TV back then versus basic cable or, channels outside of it there. Maybe it's always destined to head to that split, and maybe in the future it's going to be all streaming and then, in that. But I don't know how accessible it is to most of the sports fan base. I'm sure it feels very different here in California than it would back east. So I'd kind of honestly like to learn more about what their perspective is of it. I'm encouraged. I mean, I think that new networks, or at least returning networks that we haven't seen in a while, can really brush up the quality of the broadcast themselves. I think that the current group, I feel, even NBC to an extent, but certainly in Fox's case, they've kind of rested on their laurels a little bit, and they just need some new blood, or just kind of a new approach to kind of keep it fresh, because the sport is on the verge, it feels like in some senses, the verge of really maybe not getting back to like the late 90s boom, but it's certainly, I think, getting an increased presence out there, and all while not ignoring its history either. I'm very happy with NASCAR Classics, for example. We'll see. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic is probably the best way I could put it.
Yeah, and also the CW with the Xfinity, and
There we go.
with the trucks on FS1, and of course NASCAR's doing all the Xfinity broadcasts for NASCAR Productions will produce all the Xfinity broadcasts, I should say.
There we
With
go.
your thoughts on what that could look like.
I mean, I think the biggest issue I have is the remote broadcast. I think that that's probably one of the, along with the approach towards practice that the sport has these days. I think that that's one of the damaging elements from NASCAR's COVID approach. As much as it was a tremendous success from the sports, the sanctioning body, the track owners, the sponsors to be able to get all those races in 2020, I think they learned some of the wrong lessons from that and applied it to a time where it's no longer relevant. Whether it's, yeah, again, limiting practice, doing remote broadcasts, some things are just lost in efforts like that. And so that's kind of my concern. I think having a centralized digital studio is fine. I mean, they're definitely showing that they're putting investments into. I don't believe it's just some flashy set piece. I think they're actually going to try to improve the overall production quality of what they have, or maybe just the efficiency of it. But yeah, the remote broadcast is, I know they talk about, oh, it's got all these remote broadcasting studios. I don't think that's the direction we need to be going. I think they need to still put money into at least sending, your crew out there and having play-by-play people and, people on pit road and garage reporters. I don't believe that that's an extraneous thing. I don't get why the direction. Well, I mean, I get why. I'm sure it's more cost effective. But something is really lost in that, and I think it's not just an issue in NASCAR. I think it's more glaring in NASCAR. But you're the ability to pick out something that's happening on the track that you can't see on TV. That's why you have play-by-play people. That's why you have multiple people, because they're going to be looking at different things. Maybe they'll draw a different bit of focus to it. And I just don't think you can replicate that when everybody's looking at the exact same screens in Charlotte somewhere. So that's kind of more my issue with that. As to the networks, I don't really have too much concern one way or the other. It's going to be, I mean, hard to picture here, but as to how that's going to be colored by remote broadcasting, I think that's more my bigger concern.
Yeah. And also last thing is what's coming up on the channel in 2024. What can people expect?
Good question. I think the big thing is, again, my focus is to I really want to beef up the production schedule on my channel here and do that. I think it's always been a challenge to kind of juggle it between what I do on the weekends there for either the entry list storylines or the stuff on the lastcar.info. But I really want to kind of, focus on, just getting some more content out there. I actually have a couple of scripts on individual driver profiles that I'd like to get together. Of course, more episodes of 500 Days. I'm trying to work on a way to actually get multiple episodes of 500 Days produced simultaneously so that I can have, make sure that there's a continuing storyline, through all of them, kind of like what we had with the Vegas and Atlanta ones earlier this year. This is kind of unusual this week where it's basically just one standalone one and the next one hasn't been written yet. So I just want to get to the point where it's almost like a shipyard, where it's just like, there's always something that it's in different phases of being produced, and then get it out the other side. It's challenging because it's basically just me doing it here. The stuff on NASCAR Man's channel, that's all stuff that he writes himself. I just narrate those. So that's not really a factor in terms of my own production schedule. But that's what I'd like to do. It's going to be just more field fillers. Field fillers, is very interview based. So are the standalone driver interviews. But the nice thing with 500 Days is that it's not necessarily, needing interviews. The Richard Childress thing was really lucked out on that earlier this year. But the idea with that series is if I got some projects that are stalling out, which was actually how 500 Days got started to begin with. My Stanton Barrett video stalled out on that. This allows me to still have something out there, so people aren't just waiting for months or a year for anything on the channel. I want to kind of change that. At least that's the goal. Well, we'll see how successful that is.
All right. Well, Brock Beard, thank you so much for the time as always. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you for having me on. Merry Christmas, everyone.